dealerships, McLeod's on Playford Avenue and Wailer Toyota and Hyundai and Essendon Lewis Avenue. I guess the most important thing I want to talk about is what's relevant to you guys and today. It's not easy to get a job at the end of your schooling, as you probably know, and you'll be starting to think about that. But what I want to talk about is when I was 16 years old, I was sitting in exactly the same place you are, just a different school. I went to Stewart High School up the road, and in 1982 I finished with, and I did basically it was a course that paved you to get a trade. So I didn't do year 12, I wasn't smart enough to do year 12, to be absolutely honest. I would have failed miserably, and then so at the end of year 11 at Stewart High School, obviously I finished up school and I got not an apprenticeship, I started as a spare parts delivery boy at a dealership called Mitchell Holden, which is on Essendon Lewis Avenue. So I did that for 18 months, and then the boss asked me if I wanted to be an apprentice. So I started off as a apprentice motor mechanic. I did that for 4 years, and because I did 18 months in spare parts, I was probably around 18 when I started my apprenticeship, which I thought helped me because I was a little bit more mature. And as I said, I was never a Rhodes Scholar at school, so trade school was really good for me. And I'm pleased to say that I did pretty well at trade school. Lots of distinctions, won apprentices of the year. And then at about 22 years old, I decided I didn't want to roll around under cars for the rest of my life, so I became a salesman. And I guess the rest is history. Did that for I did that for maybe 27, 28, and then the Mitchell family sold the dealership to a company called the Smith Motor Group, which is a very large automotive concern, and they invited me in to be a shareholder in 1996. So ever since then, obviously I've been the managing director of that business, and it's grown from there. We employ 35 people between both sites. We've got roughly 10 mechanics and 5 apprentices. So because of the story I've just told you, that's why I always take on young people, because that's where I started. So, but what gave me my opportunities, as I said, I was never very smart, was my attitude and the fact that I believed in myself. I was respectful to everybody around me. When you go for an interview, you don't have to have a $200 suit on or a $500 suit. You can wear a pair of jeans as long as they're clean and they're ironed, and your shirt's ironed and presentable, and you've had a haircut and a shave that day. You don't have to be rich to look good and get a job, but you've got to show that you're making an effort. And that would be the most important thing I would want to get across to you guys today, is the fact that when you're sitting in front of an employer, if he knows you're keen and he knows that you've got a passion and you really want to be there, that's what will get you the job, in my opinion. So, as I said, I came from Scott Street and Stewart High School, so not a lot different to you guys. The course I was doing meant you couldn't go on to matric, so you had to get a trade or get a job after school. A lot of my mates went on and did matric, and they were unemployed and I had a job. So if the opportunity comes your way to get an apprenticeship when you finish year 11 and you don't want to go into year 12, or you can't go into year 12, I'd strongly recommend you take it. And sometimes in life you've got to be in the right place at the right time, but if there's 3 of you in the right place at the right time, you want to make sure that you get the heads up. So there you go. That's basically my story. Anybody got any questions? So when you come to the dealership today, I'll get my service manager to talk to you, which will tell you more about trade school. Obviously you all know it's a 4-year course. You have to do TAFE at Port Augusta, unfortunately. They don't do automotive and wire anymore. Haven't for 20 odd years. So, but yeah, so at the end, have a go at the end of your schooling. As I say, just make sure you're presentable, polite, respectful, good attitude. And attitude will get you everywhere. That's what it's all about these days. Sometimes it's a little bit of right time, right place, who you know, not what you know, but it's all about attitude. And the academic part will come as you mature as a person. You know, whether your reading and your math and all that's not fantastic now, it'll only get better as you go on. And that's my experience. How'd I go? All right?
Yeah, really well.
What, did you get, an 8 out of 10?
Solid, at least.
Solid? Good.
Did just a quick question. If we've got, all these boys are all applying for apprenticeships, being able to show that you're keen at an interview is really important.
Yep.
But what makes you stand out when you're applying for a job?
I guess what you should be doing now, which is what this course is for, is to identify whether you want to be in the car game or the building game or auto electrical, whatever. And you should try and grab some work experience that heads you down that path, because obviously when there's a lad sitting in front of us and he's a good lad and he presents well and all that sort of stuff, obviously if you've done work experience at an automotive business twice before, if you're in the dirt circuit club and you're into cars, when I talk about passion, you've got to have a bit of an interest in what you're doing. So your old man might be a bit of a handyman that puts up pergolas on the weekends and stuff like that, and if you're helping him on the weekend, you're going to be a little bit further advanced. That's not the be-all and end-all, but that's the sort of thing I'm talking about. So if you really want to be a motor mechanic, you've got to do work experience at a couple of automotive places, and there'll be a few on the list apart from us, I'm sure. And if you want to be an auto electrician, well, you should be doing some work experience at Norrie Auto Electrical or Weiler Battery Electric, all that sort of stuff. And I guess the same goes to the building trade, the Steve Whites of the world and people like that. So you've got to, I would say, when you're interviewing someone, you'll soon pick whether they're passionate about the industry you're interviewing for or not. So, and as I said, if you're into cars and all that sort of stuff, or you think you want to be, it can't hurt to tinker with the old man in the shed or get involved as a volunteer at the Dirt Circuit Club and things like that. You'll soon buddy up and meet someone that'll help you out. Good answer?
Yeah, brilliant answer. So we're going through the process at the moment where we're talking about writing our resumes.
Yes.
So we're talking about what we can write in there that makes you stand out. You might be going for an apprenticeship against people who are older, have more experience.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is just don't write the resume because this is the way they're meant to be set out, which is important, but you've got to tell on a piece of paper, and that's literally what we're doing. Is we might have 30 applicants and you want to pick the top 5 to interview, and it's that piece of paper. So obviously, as I said, if you're involved in those clubs, obviously from our point of view it's not the be all and end all, but being involved in a club, whether it be soccer, football, archery, anything, teaches a person some discipline. Because when little Clarko's telling you to run 5 laps at Westies, well, it's a discipline to go and do that. And you'd be surprised how many kids these days just can't be told what to do. So from a sporting point of view, that's another discipline. From a volunteer's point of view, if you volunteer for something, you're giving back to the community, which again shows your character. So I would just, as far as the resume is concerned, just put everything you can in there. It might just be one thing that lights up the employer's eyes, that makes them think that you potentially could be a better employee than the next person. Loyalty is important. Obviously, as you've worked out, I've worked for one company my whole life. So sometimes you can make your own luck through loyalty. So, people that jump around. Obviously, many of you may have jobs at Hungry Jack's or KFC or Coles, Woolies, whatever. That's also important because it shows a discipline, it shows a routine, it shows that you can get off your ass and actually go out and earn yourself some money. Let's be honest, it's all about earning $1 at everybody's age. And the other thing I will say is, it's easier to get a job when you got a job, in my opinion. So it might not be your dream job to start with, but it can be a stepping stone. I mean, you might have to clean cars or do something else in the auto trade for 6 months or 12 months. But if an opportunity comes up, make sure you're there to get it. So,
yeah,
right.
Fantastic.
All right, well, any questions from you guys? Right. And I guess on a positive, with the town the way it's going at the moment, by the time you guys are ready to leave school at the end of next year, I believe, or
for the boys who get into the ACE program, they will have finished their SACE certificate at the end of next year, and they'll be able to go find apprenticeships, find work. So
there's a lot more opportunities now than there was 18 months ago. So from a positive point of view, there's probably some scope there as well. So, but like I said, when you go to that interview, grooming's very important, and attitude, and just be clean and tidy. Don't have to have expensive clothes on, just be clean and tidy. And have a good attitude and see how you go.
Just quickly, you talked a bit about loyalty and staying with the company for a long time. If they've got jobs now, what does that longevity kind of show you as someone who reads through resumes? And
yeah, well, I think obviously, like I said earlier, it means that you're committed to the community for a start. I don't know, I guess you're all long-term residents. Some are, some aren't. But it also shows that when things get a little bit tough, that you're prepared to stick it out, you know, because you've been at KFC for 2 years or whatever. And the other thing is, I quite often say to my apprentices when I take them on, obviously first year of wages aren't fantastic, so you may want to keep your after school job or do 4 or 5 hours at your casual job still, providing it doesn't interfere with your 8 till 5 apprenticeship. And again, that can be some extra money for yourselves, and when you're ready, you know, move over don't work there anymore, perhaps halfway through, because you're gonna, the 3-month probation period, which everybody gets, it's law, means that gives us 3 months for me to decide whether I like the apprentice, and more importantly for the apprentice to decide whether they like the employer, because it's not for everybody. Different companies work in different ways. But yeah, from our point of view, we're a very fair employer, obviously. You have to be to survive these days in a small community. Many of my staff have worked for me for 22 years, 12 years, 15 years, so got a lot of long-term staff. And again, because if you generally do the right thing by the employer, well, the good ones will always do the right thing by the employee. So, yeah.
So, I like you mentioned something really important there, that resiliency.
Yes.
That it's one of the key words we talk about here at school. And when we look at that sheet that you guys have been looking at,
I guess communication is important as far as resilience. Like if you communicate and you tell the boss your side of the story and how you see it, and vice versa, they'll respect you a lot more for being honest. Now, the result might not change. He might say, well, that's the way it is, stiff shit, if you don't like it, go work somewhere else. I'd be a little bit disappointed if they did, but you know, I guess communication and honesty is another recommendation. And of course, as the obvious one is, you've got to keep your nose clean with the law and stuff like that. Facebook, you know, like a lot of employers, I personally don't, but I know my younger staff do. If I'm looking at employing someone, they'll go straight to their Facebook and you can tell me their life, you know, so that's important. Obviously, how you conduct yourself in the community is pretty important in a small town. It shouldn't be the be-all and end-all, and it won't mean that you're a great tradesperson or you're a shit tradesperson, but it's about getting that start. If you don't keep your nose clean and do the right thing, you might not get that start. So I think that's pretty important in today's society as well. How you conduct yourself on social media and around the community is pretty important. So.
Definitely, and especially as you say, in a small town, word spreads.
Yep, the bad news will get home before you do. Good news never seems to spread, but bad news does. So.
Yeah.
All right.
So, do you guys have any questions about, you know, what you guys may want to put on your resume? What, you know, we've talked about, Malcolm's talked about how you present well for an interview. Do you guys have any questions that you kind of need any further explanation on?
Does long hair look messy?
No, not if you're tidy. Not if it's tidy or you put it in a ponytail or whatever. You know, it's not. We're not there to judge anybody. I guess ultimately that's what we are doing. But if you're clean and tidy, and like if you were going to be an apprentice builder, they'll probably make you wear a hairnet or something like that. But it's not. Long hair's. You know, we're not complete idiots. We know the way the society goes these days, and that's a personal choice. You know, so, but it wouldn't deter. You know, I know you are all very young, but you know, if you've got tattoos, for example, some people might wear a long sleeve shirt and cover those up. Once you're in, it doesn't matter. But you don't want to rock up to an interview with no studs and earrings and stuff like that. It's just because why take the chance? Like I'm a fairly level-headed, open sort of guy, but if you're getting interviewed by somebody that doesn't like that sort of stuff, it could finish you. So why take the chance? Put it back in when you go home. And from my point of view, we don't run with a lot of that stuff because we're driving other people's cars and all that sort of stuff. So even when you work for us, how you conduct yourself in the community is very important, because if you drive your own car like a Hearn, people think, shit, when they're test driving my car, is that how he drives? You know, so you just got to be aware of all that sort of stuff. But as far as long hair, presentation, that's not I wouldn't have thought that would be a game changer. As I said, studs and stuff like that, for the sake of an interview, take them out, show the person the respect that you want the job, and then afterwards, that's a question you could ask at an interview. Do you mind my long hair? Do you mind if I wear a nose stud if I was successful? You know, he'll say yes or no. So. Fair enough?
Yeah, definitely. Sounds
no
like
big nights the night before the interview. You know.
Very important one, that one.
Don't have one on Mad Monday or anything like that. So. All right. Any other questions?
One more is about kind of communication. If we've got boys who are looking at auto trade or carpentry or construction or electrotech, being able to communicate with a team, and skills that, like, let's say they play footy or something, how that may relate or translate.
Yeah, well, as I said earlier, I think being a member of, you don't have to be a gifted sportsman, you don't have to play sport, but being a member of any community organisation shows a bit of commitment, and it shows an attitude that you give back to the community. You know, like the lads that play football, they've been brought up in families that are football families, that's fine, but not all of us are, maybe not all of you are, but there's a lot of other ways you can give back to the community which will hold you in good stead, especially if you're looking at that automotive career path. As I said, speedway, dirt circuit, go-karts, there's a million things that you could be involved in. So.
Brilliant. I think, is there anything that you'd like to go through with these boys in terms of what they should be expecting for the rest of the day when they get to...
Yeah, it's pretty difficult because obviously it's a dangerous environment with moving cars and stuff like that, but 11:15 the boys will be back from Brew. Obviously the Playford Avenue site is a 4-year-old facility, so it's something we're very proud of. As you probably know, that we lost the Holden franchise in December because we bought a Toyota dealership basically, so we are moving Toyota up to that site eventually, but so it's a big, beautiful, you'll be surprised, I'll take you in the workshop and you'll see. So basically the dealership you're going to go to, we obviously sell new and used cars with the RAA, roadside assistance contractor, which keeps us very busy. So we've got tilt trays and the RAA van and trailers and all that sort of stuff. We also do tyres. We've got McLeod's tyres, so you'll see lots of tyre fitting machinery and all that sort of stuff. So it'll just give you there's not too much there that we don't do. It'll give you a good grounding on what a workshop is. We have employed auto electricians in the past. The problem is filling the day all with electrical work for that trade. But certainly come and have a wander around. We'll be able to do it in one group if we stick together, and we'll go from there. As I said, Jeremy's my service manager, so he'll have a bit of a yak to you, because what happens in the real world is, yeah mate?
Do you know Jeremy's got it?
Walden.
He's my cousin.
Yeah, dirt circuit club, away you go. Obviously when you're a motor mechanic, and I don't know how it works in other trades, but when you're in a dealership, you clock on and off. So obviously everybody goes to work, you clock on. But what happens when you're a mechanic is you clock on and off everybody's job for that day. So if Mr. Smith's car's in for a service and you clock onto it, and that service should take an hour and a half, well, we're checking to make sure you've done it in an hour and a half, because we can only sell it for an hour and a half. So if you take 3 hours, well, obviously you've been too slow on that job. We can still only charge Mr. Smith an hour and a half, so it's important, so there's a lot to it. So it's about efficiencies and stuff like that. But and as I said, your work experience is pretty important. If you're not successful in getting a job at the end of your school, do a TAFE course, you know, anything like that that shows you've got a bit of interest. Like I'm a diesel mechanic by trade as well because I went to night school when I was doing my motor mechanic apprenticeship. So if you're not successful first time round, don't be disappointed, but maybe it can't hurt to do a TAFE course or something that's relevant to the trade you're doing.
Oh, brilliant. That all sounds really good. Well, just one last thing that I just remembered when you were talking about the fact that you've got an hour and a half to do a job.
Yeah.
In terms of speaking in front of a team, you might have your service manager who allocates out jobs for a day.
Yep.
These boys, aspire to work in that kind of role. Is it important for you to be able to speak to your team, speak to your customers, speak to other employees?
Absolutely. I mean, especially it's a Toyota thing. We have what's called a Toyota for Life, which is, because it's a Japanese company, they're very much into the respect and all that sort of stuff. So we call them external, they call customers guests in Toyota world. So we have external guests, which is Mr. Smith, our customer, but we also have internal guests, which is the guy you've got to work alongside of all day. So respect is a very big thing. And as you said, we'll show you when you get there, but what happens is when you get to work in the morning, there's a big whiteboard, and obviously we book sort of 3 or 4 days ahead, so we know exactly what jobs you're doing that day, so they're all put up under your name and the times you should finish that job. And then what we do is we message Mr. Smith, your car's booked in for 11 o'clock, so can you make sure it's here by 10:30, because so-and-so is finishing that job at 11, then he's going to clock straight onto Mr. Smith's car. And then theoretically, if it's an hour and a half job, we would never say that it's going to be ready at 12:30, but we might say pick it up at 1 o'clock or something, so it gives us half an hour. Because when you're a tradesman, things go wrong. The only other thing I want to talk about quickly is it's very important. Do you deal with career employment group here? Does Kevin Rogan come in and talk to the kids and stuff like that?
Whether it's for these boys or they do it next year?
Yep, okay. So it's important that you register with career employment group's probably the biggest in Whyalla, but there's other, like there's the Motor Traders Association. Now, what happens is a lot of employers go through career employment group. Now, I go through career employment group because I've been with them for many, many years. And what happens, theoretically, if the work slows, you can move the apprentice to another, you can ask career employment group to take the apprentice somewhere else. We don't do that. We would rather have you pulling up weeds if it's quiet for a week or whatever. So, but it's important that you register with career employment group, because that's where most of the apprentices these days will come from, and go from there. So as you go down the road to a trade, I'm sure they'll come in and talk to you. And they'll do aptitude tests and all that sort of stuff, which we get. But again, it's not always the be all and end all, because even a tradesman, when he's finished his 4 years, it doesn't make him a quality tradesman. It's the experience. Like, it might take 5 or 6 years before it clicks. So you just gotta hang in there, and it will come eventually. So that's important. If you're a year in and you think, geez, I can't do this, you've got to stick with it, which is where resilience comes from. So.
Seems that word is, we've talked about it about 4 times.
Yeah.
As you know, I'm sure you guys have it at school. You have bad days and you have good days, and
yeah,
when one of those bad days comes along, you need to be able to get back on the horse.
Yeah, and in today's society, for adults and kids, that's very important. Life has a habit of kicking us in the arse, so we just got to get up and get on with it. So, all right, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah,
if you think of anything else, obviously, I'll see you up there at 11 or 15:15 whenever you get there. And as I said, I'll introduce you to Jeremy, Brad Smith, if he's floating around. I'll get him to talk to you guys about. There's many ways you can go in the automotive industry. It doesn't just have to be a motor mechanic. There's accountants, there's HR people, there's lots of different career paths. But the important thing is you just got to get yourself in there. Yeah, and go from there.
Well, sounds fantastic.